Is that why Obama's pushing back against the 9/11 families suing the Saudis?
I don't know. I don't have any knowledge of any.
What's that?
The Obama's pushing back against the 9/11 families that lost loved ones, so being able to sue the Saudis. Is that why?
No, that's never going to happen. For one thing, who knows about? Who's all seen my 9/11 program?
I haven't seen that. I've seen a part of it on videos.
Only a couple of you guys? All right. On September 17, 2012, on the anniversary of 9/11, the morning that the towers came down, I was videotaping, and I videotaped the whole thing. And we're like, this don't seem right. One thing you've got to, FRCP 41A is anytime you make a mistake, this is how you cancel whatever you screwed up on. Redemption, strawman, UCC, or wrote a bad lawsuit, an adverb verb, use a FRCP 41A voluntary withdrawal, and then they can't touch it. You just put that in, they'll give you your paperwork back, and always make sure you have a corrected document, because you're going to be talking to us anyways when you can do that, and then shove that in right away so nobody gets sued for handling bad papers. Okay. In World Trade Center, 1,300 feet tall. If I dropped an anvil off the top of the building, it would take 12.8 seconds to fall. Speed is 33, 66, 99, 132, and so on. So it took 12.8 seconds under acceleration to hit the concrete. World Trade Center fell down in 4.8 seconds. What's wrong with this? This thing's made out of concrete, steel, and glass. And they said, oh, they got a fire up on top here at 87th floor. But when the building moved, you had a center plume exactly 850 feet from center first, before the building moved, both of them. So what does that tell you? There's an explosion. Acceleration is a C4 explosion that accelerates hunks of concrete, steel, and glass in a vertical transmission that far away. And then the whole thing comes down. Now, concrete, steel, and glass, because I'm a metallurgist, heat treater, welding tech, and I deal with coefficients of expansion of gases and metals, so I can do heat treating on tool steels. 26 years experience. 6.3 equals hydrocarbon. So you got a hydrocarbon, and what's a hydrocarbon? Well, plastic is a hydrocarbon, like this pen is made out of. Concrete is a hydrocarbon. Glass is a hydrocarbon. Steel is a hydrocarbon. Iron's a hydrocarbon. But when you add carbon to steel, it makes, carbon to iron, it makes steel. Then you throw a little manganese in there, give it a little nickel, make it ductile, so it's got flexibility. But this factor of 6.3 is unique. What is C4 explosive, or thermite, made out of? 6.3 plastic. When a 6.3 molecule explodes, which is plastic explosive, it only affects a 6.3 molecule. And what it does is, by an electromagnetic pulse, which is 1,300 feet round like this, it takes every single molecule that's in that of concrete, steel, and glass and reduces it to a single atom called smoke. Now, asbestos, which is lined in both buildings, is not a 6.3 molecule. So the asbestos, because of the shock wave of a 6.3 explosion, this stabilizes the asbestos, and that's that big white cloud that took off to the northwest when the buildings came down. Now, the exact second this took place, all of a sudden you got this is all smoke here. You can't actually see the building. And five seconds later, it's still, the building's all down in the basement, nice and neat, packed down in the basement. Now, there were 13 buildings that were 30 to 50 stories tall around the 103-story building of the World Trade Center. They all fell down under their own gravity because they were caught in the gravity well which took their concrete, steel, and glass and reduced it to smoke also. They weren't on fire, but you know, all these buildings around the World Trade Center were also empty when they went down. Everybody was told to stay home that day. And there's 50,000 people a day that work in the World Trade Center for 30 years exposed to asbestos in the walls. Jeez, how's that for an insurance lawsuit for asbestos? Now, how are you going to pay 50,000 people for 30 years? Oh, that's trillions of dollars of liability against the government, because guess who owns the World Trade Center? Port Authorities in New York City, which is the post office, which controls the treasury and owns the money. Ooh, that's the whole United States budget in 2 buildings. Two real eyesore. If you take a look at the 2 planes that both flew in and you magnify them, there were no windows in any of the two planes. They didn't have windows, they were drones. Nobody died in that thing, except the people in the buildings. Okay, so at the same time, we've got to solve this asbestos problem, and they got to bring this building down, and they got to do it quick. But then they want to blame somebody else in a different country. They want to go into Iraq, secure the 1/3 of the world's richest light sweet crude oil. And of course, King Hussein's out there killing his own people and that, so this is a good, you know, let's be the good guy and stop genocide program. But at the same time, we need an excuse to drop these 2 buildings. If we took them apart little by little, it would take years. They'd have to put a big plastic bubble over this thing. It would cost hundreds of dollars an hour for thousands of people to clean this all up. So let's cook up an act of war, get an act of war. So the United States military, 186 soldiers, were involved with the cord placement in the elevator shafts of the C4. When the C4 is detonated, and you can watch the explosions go ping, 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 all the way down as this thing is coming down. Now, how do you take a 4-foot thick I-beam with a 2-inch web on it and turn it into smoke in 1 millisecond?
You cut it.
No, you don't cut it. You expose it to C4, gravitational wave. When the gravitational wave takes place, C4 has an 85,000 pound per square inch pressure wave. It takes all the concrete, steel, and glass molecules and reduces them to single atoms. So even though you're looking at a World Trade Center, it's actually a column of smoke. And every single computer that's in this computer in the building also is made out of plastic and silica, which is a 6.3 molecule. The only thing that's in there that really isn't is the gold processor. But once everything is vaporized, the gold can turn into dust and disappear with the rest of it. Now, what happened at the exact point of detonation? $12 trillion was transferred out of the World Trade Center through Honolulu, Hawaii, where one of my bankers is sitting, one of my students who works for the Hawaiian government, and monitored a $12 trillion transfer out of the World Trade Center into the Singapore Bank, world's largest bank. So we had $500 million a year for the next 22 years to supply the war machine to keep the oil flowing from Iraq. That's what happened there. That was a bank robbery. Then they blew out the basement floor, and 1 hour before the World Trade Center was hit, all the subways were shut down in New York City. The military came in, and what runs underneath the World Trade Center? Heavy rails for the subway. They blasted, at the same time this went off, they blasted the basement floor, which is concrete and steel, in the gold vaults, and they stole all the gold from the World Bank. This is the World Bank. Loaded them onto the subway system, and that disappeared into wherever. So now you've got a bank robbery taking place. Now we have to go ahead and declare and blame it on somebody. So we find somebody in a foreign country who's got a lot of oil, and blame it on him as a terrorist, and 3,800 people die in this accident where there should have been 50,000 people at the time of the blast. So it's just enough, just like Pearl Harbor, only 1,700 people died. Pearl Harbor was hit by the post office, which controls the military, but the military only bombed the postal ships, postal planes, and postal buildings. No civilian sites were hit during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So it was a war between 2 postmasters who controlled their military. You see what's going on here? And here, the Universal Postal Union controls the post office. The post office controls the military, which owns the C-4. And the only section of the Pentagon that blew up and killing 186 men was Black Ops, where all the guys work that handle C-4 division. I'm a muster master for the Pentagon. So is Russell. We both got our treaties back in 1999 to protect all U.S. troops from any acts of genocide by any government in the world, and we would be called in to disqualify the contracts if they're written like this here to make them go away and protect all of our troops. So we're the heroes of the military. Even though we're nice, quiet little mice here, we do enjoy those privileges. So the World Trade Center, I'm watching this thing and I'm sitting there with a stopwatch again and again and again. It's 4.8 seconds. This thing came down. Somebody changed gravity. And being a person with chemistry background and coefficient of expansions, because I got a heat treat tool steel, I know that 6.3 is the key. That was a smoking gun. And some guy driving a van into the basement or flying a plane up here, which heat goes up, so the fire was raging so hot it melted the I-beams, which created a collapse. Well, how is fuel oil at 1800 degrees going to melt steel I-beams that are encased in concrete and insulated with asbestos in 4.8 seconds when they're 4 feet thick and a half-inch web, and then do that to 1,300 feet of it all at once in 4.8 seconds? Even in free fall, it's against the law. It would take months for that building to melt itself down. So this here was a telltale to bringing both of them down, and allowed me to put on a 1-hour program about how C4 was used to demolish both buildings. And everyone on this planet who's ever touched explosives to drop buildings said this was the cleanest demolition ever exercised in the history of demolition. To put it into the basement and not even make it fall over anywhere. Because when the wave collapsed, it took smoke and brought smoke into the basement. Now, when they went to clean up this big mess, while all that smoke came down, it didn't grab on to the asbestos. That got blown away in the wind and killed and contaminated 10 million New Yorkers. That's why I have all these lawsuits out there for asbestos with the lungs. So then, you know, an hour later or so, then the Pentagon got hit. Then Flight 93. They made a movie, they played you the videos. The 737 weighs 238 tons. Titanium blades on the engines, they're ceramically coated. It takes 4,800 degrees to melt one of those puppies. And they're 180,000 tensile steel, titanium. And there was only one piece of aluminum found in a crater 100 feet wide and 50 feet deep. Where's the 200 plus tons of airplane? The only airplane crash in the history of airplane crashes didn't have an airplane. I mean, come on. You know, it's like the guy that lands on the moon. He's got a retro racket to drop this 30-ton spacecraft, but he gets off the ladder and he's stepping in dust. I bet you there wasn't if they did land on the moon, any dust within 200 feet of that blast zone, because it would have been blown away by the rocket. But don't worry about the 38 different shadows of the microphone that came down in the picture. Yeah.
All right, Judge, I got a question for you. Okay, all right, based off what you said, how does that explain the cars, the toasted cars, a mile away, the cars completely on fire with all the paper around it not burning, or spontaneous fires popping? What the gravity waves explain is how does explain the beams and all being wrapped and turned to jellyfish.
Real easy. Real easy.
Okay.
Okay, have you all seen the Bikini atomic bomb that's been on the Discovery Channel for 40 years? Whenever a hydrogen explosion or atomic bomb is detonated, there are what's called plasma balls within the detonation. So when a C4 detonation takes place, there's plasma balls that are created where the gravitational well is so strong that gravity can't touch the steel. And so when they go to test it, it tests to be 100% perfect. All the rest of the steel that was not inside the gravity well has been turned into smoke. And they just shoveled it up and they took it away as dirt or dust. So that's the only thing they tested was what was caught inside the gravity walls of plasma. And plasma is always created when a detonation takes place.
So that field, the plasma fields affected the cars that far away.
Everything, right? Everything that wasn't disintegrated was in plasma. This here, the 6.3 though, is a telltale to bring this tonnage into the basement in 4.3
With
seconds.
the 6.3, that makes sense because they had steel that was jellified. It looked like it had been pulled apart. Steel doesn't just do these things when, like you said, a free fall collapse happens.
Those things that were melted or heated or right on the edge of the plasma wells may have had some kind of a partial magnetic disruption within the molecules of the concrete and the steel and the glass and made them spongy.
Okay, so if this wave was bigger, it could have disintegrated all the buildings in that particular area, not just the World Trade Center.
No, it would have all, that was controlled detonation.
Gotcha.
So, but when you if something is burning up, how does it get 850 feet from center?
Exactly. And
It's got to be blasted.
Exactly.
So both of them, this is all telltale stuff.
Right, and there's also this energy once they fell down the first time, where the energy comes from to bring the rest.
So when I did this and I exposed the 6.3 coefficient of 4.6 coefficient of expansion of concrete, steel, glass, and plastic, and in 1988 I wrote the mathematical interface that all steel is plastic, all concrete is plastic, and all glass is plastic, because at 2200 is plastic, you can tie knots to anything. Steel at 1850 is plastic, because of this one little thing. It's called the space center cube molecule. And all of these things have the same thing. Now you have a single nuclei below 1650 degrees. But above 1650, the nuclei splits and goes to the centers called center face cube molecules, which is plastic. Using all the chemistry in plastic, since plastic was invented back in the 50s, we then did the overlay of the molecule to concrete, steel, and glass, and I proved that all steel is plastic, changing the way all steel is manufactured in the world. And that was done in 1988. In my books, a study came from Johnson, metallurgy books, from the 1920s, 1930s. He was a genius. And then the Encyclopedia of Welding, which dealt with all the coefficients and all the different elements on the periodic table, and how the atomic densities come together. So putting that all together, I put on a 1-hour comprehensive program on this, and I proved it to the world, and that video was used by the firemen, the policemen, and the rescue workers to get a $385,000 paycheck for wrongful death, or those that did survive still got the check because they were exposed to the asbestos as a settlement. Now, 3,800 people filed wrongful deaths, and they nom de guerre their names of the survivors. Nom de guerre the names of the dead people. And Mrs. Mariano got one lawsuit filed in quantum, the same as your foreclosures, about fictitious conveyance of language by the government. And she sued for the wrongful death of her husband, and she got $385,000. And all 3,800 cases were dismissed because dead people can't sue or make contract under Title 46, Chapter 1, Section 1. And that saved the government $1 trillion right there. So, this technology, the government loves what we do because we make so many trillions of dollars off of us every year, and we're able to solve things that can't be solved. Cases that run for 12, 14, 15 years. In the Solomon Island case went from 1929 to 2012. They couldn't solve it. And I won $880 million for the Solomon Island genocide at the Hague because of syntax. My technology is solid, and it's a smoking gun signed confession of anything I go after. And this is what happened to the World Trade Centers. So we got paid. The New York judge took one look at my lawsuit, and he disqualified everybody and sent them home. Never had to pay anybody a penny.
Is that 28-page document they keep talking about straighten this out?
No, it's not. They would have to confess the 6.3, but the smoking gun is the 4.2 drop. They don't want to talk about the 4.2 drop, 4.8 seconds.
It's 2,000.
Because that's a smoking gun, and they can't make that go away. And everybody in the world videotaped that. There's millions of videotapes on it. So, when you guys got technical questions on metallurgy, welding, structural design, you can call me. I got degrees in these fields. I'm really good at it. So, worked at it for 26 years at Radio Smith. Any questions on the World Trade Center? Okay. Oh,
I got one more question.
yeah.
Now, since then they have not built in that same area. I've noticed that they've built a continuous running water system there, and that they're building new towers. So is because of this technology that they use there, is it impossible for them now to build a building in that area because of the problems with the steel?
No, they went in and they sprayed the bathtub, and that's concrete reinforced. It's a plastic. Built that new bathtub, and they put the World Trade Center down, the new one that they got up there now.
Okay, so that field is not still lingering.
No, they dug all that dirt out that was exposed to the pulse.
Yeah.
That had to all be dug out and dumped 300 miles offshore in 18,000 feet of water, so it would never be discovered or chemically analyzed.
That's what we were seeing when we saw that what looked like molten.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
They took all that stuff and they dumped it.
So that site pretty much now is still that whatever's going on, that torsion field or vortex.
No. They got it all dug out and checked.
Okay.
So and then when they said a 737 flew into the Pentagon, where's the 167 foot wingspan go when you got 188 foot hole?
Exactly.
And it was. Then all the telephone poles are still standing, all the construction. I was at the Pentagon the day after it blew up and killed all those guys. I personally was on my, I got out of bed and I got in my car, and 14 hours later I was at the Pentagon.
So did people die in the Trade Center? I mean, did people actually get killed?
3,800 people died at the World Trade Center. There was thousands of people in on the detonation, did not be at work that day. The governor knew about it, the city mayor knew about it, the military knew about it, subways were closed, everything was prepared to create an act to put us into war, to get rid of the asbestos, and then go after the oil. And then old man Bush went out and bought 69 super tankers at $11 a barrel with gas, for oil. And Junior, after this happened, 6 weeks later, pushed the price up to $140 a barrel. And he made $500 million a boatload every day for his entire presidency until he brought the oil back down to where it is today, $42 a barrel. Stole $1 trillion from us. What a nice guy.
Yeah.
The bubble also took in Building 7?
Say again?
The bubble also took in Building 7?
Yeah, that took out all the buildings that surrounded there. They all fell down. They were inside the bubble in both World Trade Centers because it was duplicated both times. And it was the same detonation, same everything, and they repeated it. And it took a couple more hours because it wasn't in the center for all the buildings to fall down around it. They were caught in the pulse wave. And what didn't take it out the first time, the second one destroyed the molecular structure of the weight of the building, just crushed it. But nobody died in those buildings. They were all vacated.